Ladies and gentlemen, and genetic anomalies, what is happening? Hope you guys are having a fantastic day, and I hope that today's stream makes your day at least a little bit better. I'm coming to you live from the East Coast of the United States of America, and today we are going to be reacting to a few news stories and mostly videos that I've been wanting to get to for a while. As you know, in the last stream, I made a whole queue of all these videos I wanted to react to. Then I ran out of time. I said, oh, I'll react to the rest tomorrow. I did not have the time or the energy to react to the rest of the ones the following day. So I'm going to try to jump in, react to the videos that I didn't react to, but I should have reacted to. I'll just go through as many of those as I can, and we will see how many of these things I can get through. Now, I will say my unified chat is actually not working right now. I'm not sure what's happening, but none of my sources seem to be working. Here, hold on. Let me do this. I'm gonna restart my unified chat app. Actually, this is actually part of the intro. If you guys are new here, this is actually part of the intro. Part of the intro is me not knowing how to get everything live with the chat. This app is glitchy. It's weird. Literally, the only reason I'm using it is because it's the only one that supports Rumble with the like the unified chat, because most of the unified chats, they support Kick, they support YouTube, they even support Twitch, but they don't support Rumble for some reason. This is like the only one that supports Rumble. This is Social Stream Ninja is what I'm using, and so that's why I'm using it. But it's been like extremely unreliable. I just installed an update, and apparently that update broke everything, because now like nothing is working with the unified chat. So I'm not even going to be able to keep track of chat. If you're sending chats, I'll be checking the chat on the YouTube stream. Go check out the YouTube stream. If you want to know what the link to the YouTube stream is, join my Discord server. The link is on screen at cscrd.ntwb.cc. It's the place you want to be if you want to chat with me. So you can tell I have a lot of pent up energy, because I've been waiting to stream and chat with you guys for quite some time now. So for those of you who are tuning in live on Rumble and Kick, I appreciate you. Unfortunately, I do not see you. One of these days I got the unified chats all working to my satisfaction, but for now it's just going to be YouTube chats for now. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and actually cut off this music so that we can get this show on the road. I'm going to get rid of this auto duck here. All right, and there we go. So we've got this video here from Hasanabi. It's called "It's So Over." I'm really curious to see what this one is about.
Worst possible outcome for 2028. Tucker Carlson runs on an anti-Israel platform in 2028, and the Democrats put forward a pro-liberal Zionist, pro-defending America's military might.
Does he really think that Israel is going to be like the defining voting issue in the 2028 election? No. I mean, it's going to be quality of life. And I don't think that, you know, we give aid to Israel is going to be enough to get people to sort of decide not to vote for any pro-Israel candidate. You also have to consider the fact that support for Israel is extremely popular. Like, hold on, let me see. Support for Israel nationwide America poll. Let me see if there's got to be some sort of poll. Let me see. What's this? Well, actually, you know what? Because the Israel-Hamas war, it looks like support has dropped. A new survey shows that just 32% of U.S. voters view Israel positively, down from 47% in 2023. That's actually really surprising. I mean, I guess Hamas is doing what they wanted to do. But hold on. So support for... Hold on. Israel has the right to exist. America poll. Now, I will say most people probably think that I do think that most people support Israel's right to exist. Hold on. So it says here, this is from Israel on Campus Coalition. Now this data might be skewed somewhat. But what does it say? A broad majority of U.S. adults, over 80%, support Israel's right to defend itself. So, even let's say it's skewed, bump it down by let's say 20% or so out of the total support. That's still 61% of people who still support Israel's right to exist. So, when we're talking about Zionism, which is, believing that the state of Israel should exist, at least how it seems to be defined by most people, seems like a lot of people are still on board with that agenda. So this idea that, you got a bunch of single issue Israel voters or Palestine voters running around here is quite silly.
You want to know the worst possible outcome for 2028? Tucker Carlson runs on an anti-Israel platform in 2028, and the Democrats put forward a pro-liberal Zionist.
Also, Tucker Carlson is not winning a general election. I don't know who you're talking to, but he's not. He's too polarizing. He says crazy things. He cozies up to foreign leaders who are the Axis powers, let's say, not allies, but Axis powers, right? Cozying up to Vladimir Putin, chumming it up in Moscow, partying like it's 1999 or whatever. That type of stuff is not going to get you to win. I will say this: whoever wins elections, it's pretty much a race for Riz, right? It's a popularity contest, right? When was the last time the least cool candidate lost the general election? I mean, Donald Trump was unilaterally cooler than Kamala Harris, hands down. Let's see. I will say Joe Biden did have a little bit of a cool factor from being vice president, during the Joe Biden, the Barack Obama administration. I think that in the Barack Obama administration, Joe Biden seemed pretty cool. He seemed like a chill dude, and I think a lot of that sort of stuck with him, and that's why he ended up winning that election in 2020. 2016, Donald Trump, absolutely cooler than Hillary Clinton. 2012 and 2008, Barack Obama, cooler than Mitt Romney, cooler than John McCain. So if you just go down the list, it's always the cool, chill dudes who end up winning. All you have to do is be extremely likable and say what the people want to hear, and then basically you're a winner. And I don't think that's Tucker Carlson. I think that Tucker Carlson certainly has his audience. He certainly has people who, hear what he has to say, and they're absolutely on board with him. And, his message resonates with him. But still, I just don't think that Tucker Carlson's rhetoric is appealing to mainstream Americans. Just like people in the middle of the aisle and people left of center, I just don't think that he has what it takes to win an election. I think that the 2028 election is going to come down to these two individuals. On the Democrat side, you're going to have Gavin Newsom. On the Republican side, you're probably going to either have J.D. Vance or Ron DeSantis. And I think that Gavin Newsom is going to win, right? Because he is the coolest person, or the chillest person, who is in the running for president. I don't think you can list anyone else who has more of a cool factor than him. Even some people who I would love to see run for president. I personally think that Thomas Massie would make an amazing president. I would love to see him be president of the United States. I don't think that he's as cool as Gavin Newsom. Marco Rubio could give him a run for his money. I think Marco Rubio comes off as a little bit more of a statesman, or a little bit more presidential. So he sort of has that going in his favor. But I just think that Gavin Newsom is so personable. He's so likable. I know that he has these massive scandals because he's running California into the ground. However, I think that Donald Trump, or the way the media has treated Donald Trump, has lowered the standards dramatically for any president. So normal things that would ordinarily be scandals no longer are scandals in the eyes of many Americans now. So I think that that's going to allow Gavin Newsom to get away with a lot more than he would have been able to if he ran, like, let's say in 2012. Like Gavin Newsom, with his current record, current persona, current personality, in running for president in 2012, couldn't win, but running in 2028 absolutely could win.
Pro defending America's military might candidate. Tucker Carlson wins by Ronald Reagan numbers, not only by winning over the MAGA crowd, which he has.
I will say though, it'd be crazy if Tucker Carlson won. The thing is, like, I actually think that he is I actually think that Tucker Carlson is a foreign, like, asset, honestly. Like, under Russia, controlled by Putin or something, I think that just makes sense if you look at how he moves. And so to have our country actually run by a foreign asset, not talking about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not a foreign asset. It would be really weird and unfortunate.
Has complete control over, in my opinion. But also on top of that, a lot of independents and maybe even some liberals. The Democratic Party is done. The next wave of fascism is here. Like, the more accelerated version of fascism is here.
I actually agree, because Tucker Carlson is has a soft spot for Axis powers. In my opinion, is a foreign asset for Russia or Putin or whatever. I actually do think that Tucker Carlson is the type of person who, if you put him in power, put him in as president of the United States, he actually might, put fascism in place in the United States of America. Him and Ron DeSantis are like the only two people that I'd be worried about when it comes to being fascist presidents of the United States.
He actually does, unironically, put the mass deportations regime in place. That's what I'm afraid of.
He says he's running against me for president. I almost want to run for president just to debate Ted Cruz.
So that video clip, the little text there. If the video is posted by Cesspool Online, the quote is, Tucker Carlson, Ted Cruz says he's running against me for president. I almost want to run for president just to debate Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz lost all his aura. He ran for president, seemed pretty cool, then became governor or whatever, senator in Texas, and then has done basically nothing. Meanwhile, cost of living has slowly risen as the population density increases, and you've got an influx of now, and then of course, on top of that, you've got an influx of Democrats from California, who of course are going to go in and slowly turn Texas into another California. Ted Cruz has done nothing to show for the time that he's been in office, in my opinion. Like Uvalde, he didn't do anything to help with Uvalde. He didn't, make any proclamations or condemning the police response or anything. So, like, to me, Ted Cruz has sort of become useless. Ted Cruz, it's really weird, because one of my biggest gripes about the 2016 election was that Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio ran against each other, because they had basically identical platforms, except for the fact that Ted Cruz opposed the amnesty and Marco Rubio supported it. If you take the votes that they got during the primaries and combined them, they would have crushed Donald Trump in the primaries and become president of the United States. But unfortunately, that's not what happened. But it's really interesting looking at the career trajectories. Ted Cruz became a senator and went on a podcast. Marco Rubio is now the Secretary of State. And if you look historically about who political parties try to prop up, secretaries of state are pretty high up there. I believe that there was this guy, I forget his name, but I know that there was a relatively recent, I'm talking like 2000s, late 1990s, Secretary of State who ran for president under the Democratic banner. I forget his name, unfortunately. So, that makes him a lot more of a lucrative choice, or that makes him a lot more of an enticing choice for future president of the United States than someone like Ted Cruz, who's just been a senator for several years and basically done nothing and, has a podcast or whatever.
Because I think it would go.
Wait, is Ted Cruz actually running for president? I hope he's not, because I think he's basically useless now. Running for president 2028. So basically, it's something that he's bandied about, but he hasn't made any solid statements.
About the way it went last time. And for my part, I deeply enjoyed it, which is why I've never tweeted about it.
Tucker Carlson versus Gavin Newsom is unlimited Tucker Carlson victory, by the way. I'm letting you know right now. Everyone's going to be like, but what about trans people?
Wait a second. I'm a little curious now. Did he think... Let's see. Did Hassan Piker think that Trump would win the election in 2024? I don't know, but that's a horrible prediction. To say that Tucker Carlson would lose to Gavin Newsom?
You know right now, everyone's going to be like, but what about trans people? Okay? They're going to be like,
No,
Gavin Newsom is like
no.
pro-gay. Gavin Newsom will say.
This guy is it's such an echo chamber. He's talking as if the president of the United States is going to be handpicked by the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. That's not true. When you're trying to make predictions about who is going to win the next election, I'm talking general election for president of the United States, you can't be like, oh, well, who cares most about trans people? Or like, oh, who cares most about Israel? Like, come on. People care about these like tabletop issues. They want to put food on their table. They want to put gas in their car, and they want to go on vacation. They want to look at all the presidential candidates and be like, okay, which one of you guys is going to do these three things for me, or at least make it as easy as possible for me to do these three things? No one's going to look at them and be like, well, you know what? Our economy is in the tank. We're in war overseas. But you know what I care about most? Trans people. Like, you're not going to see that from the mainstream American voter. That's just not going to be the case. This guy is going to make some of the worst political predictions in this upcoming general election cycle. I might actually want to keep an eye on this guy.
Signal that he's like also in favor of limiting the pro-trans sentiment from his side because he wants to appeal to the mythical moderate center. Oof. Tucker Carlson's like, you're Israel first. You're an attack dog. You're a lapdog for Israel. I can't even tell what your positions are. One day you say Israel's an apartheid. You get a boss call from all of the Israel lobbyists. And next day you come out and you say, actually, Israel's not an apartheid.
See, like, Hassan Piker and all of his viewers may vote for Tucker Carlson over Gavin Newsom. Like, maybe they're single issue voters. Maybe, Israel is their abortion. It's like, oh, we just got to get rid of it. We're this single issue voter. But I just don't think that's going to be the mindset of most American voters. And I don't know why he thinks that's the case either, unless he only spends time listening to people who agree with him and people in his chat. Like, if that's the case, then sure, I understand it. But still, I just don't think it makes... I just don't think that take makes sense at all.
Americans need someone who actually can stand on moral principles. And as a Christian, I think genocide is unconscionable. What's going on? You see, Tucker, you're being quite anti-Semitic. No, I love Jews. I can't stand what Israel has done to my Jewish friends. What's going on? Ronald Reagan victory condition. Okay, spoiler alert.
That's stupid.
Win that battle.
This is like one of the. Maybe I hope this is satirical. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna pass. This might be satirical. I'll just let this play.
Battle. Tucker Carlson wins that battle.
Everybody knows the only reason we're having this war is because Israel wants it. This is their last chance, they believe. This presidency is the last presidency where they're going to have unequivocal bipartisan support.
This is why I've been trying to urge Democrats.
Interesting take. I mean, that might be the case. That might be part of it. I mean, I've heard inklings and rumors that, the United States didn't want to go into this conflict, but Israel did some strikes, and so America had to issue some support. I do believe that America did probably want to do some sort of strike. Iran's been developing nuclear weapons. We told them to stop. We bombed them, and they instead chose to hide their nuclear weapons, stop. What was it? Stop. Stop cooperating with the IAEA, and then just continue their missile program as if nothing had ever happened. Now they're very brazen about it, being like, oh yeah, we've got nuclear weapons. You can't stop us. Meanwhile, they're getting bombed into oblivion, and a lot of their missile sites are being destroyed and stuff. But that's neither here nor there. I just think that Israel kind of pushed America on timing. This is not when we wanted to do these strikes, nor how we wanted to do them. Not to say that our strikes have been a total failure, but I do kind of agree that Israel at the very least has pushed us into this conflict
behind closed doors and publicly to take a stronger stance against Israel. You cannot have a guy like Tucker Carlson lead the conversation on Israel. The Democrats, as a national party, have to universally oppose Israel. If you don't do that, a guy like Tucker Carlson, who has been leading the conversation for normies on the issue of Israel, will come out and destroy you. You can't play catch up by the time the election comes around where you're like, oh, well, we also want to do defensive weapons to Israel, but no offensive weapons. No, you'll lose. You'll lose 100%. Whoever is first to market with a convincing and earnest anti-Israel position will win. It does not matter how much AIPAC is spending right now.
That's not true. That's not true. Who told this guy that? That's not even close to being the truth. What is he talking about? What is this?
Whoever is first to market with a convincing and earnest anti-Israel position.
This is so dumb.
It does not matter how much.
This is so dumb. I don't understand it. This take it all this mindset, unless you think that the president of the United States is going to be dictated by the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. This makes no sense at all.
AIPAC is spending right now. Even Nita Allen is a great example of this. A short-lived campaign that came out of nowhere, okay, was almost capable of taking out a multiple-term incumbent, Valerie Foushee, that was getting the backing from every party instrument, and also on top of that was getting support from AIPAC subsidiaries too. It pains me to say this, but I think a lot of leftists would.
No, I think a lot of that is progressives tend not only to speak about Israel, they also tend to speak about quality of life. That's why I think Bugazela's campaign appealed to so many people. She was looking around and saying, hey, we need to make things more affordable. We need to make things more accessible. Regardless of whether or not I think her policies were good or bad, she was speaking to real pain that voters are feeling. Most progressives do that. And I think that's why they're successful. Not even necessarily their policies. They represent a change from the old guard of standard stock liberal Democrats, who, by the way, when you're incumbent, people will sort of blame you for whatever's going on, regardless of whether or not it's your fault. So there's that factor as well.
Vote for Tucker Carlson over Gavin Newsom. Yes. I think a lot of normies would vote for Tucker Carlson over Gavin Newsom. 100%. I'm fearful of this reality. You can't make Tucker Carlson be the convincing anti-Israel guy. This takes time. Democrats are already losing this battle.
Every Thomas Massey, and there's a whole army of them coming at some point because everyone can see what's going on. And you can shut down X, and you can just shut down the internet. You can be like Great Britain and arrest people who protest Israel, but attitudes are not going to revert to what they were 5 years ago. Sorry. And they know this. So this is their last chance.
He's right, by the way. He is completely right on this. The real issue.
I do think that they could, but, the Israel-Hamas war would have to end. And you would have to give it at least like 10 or 15 years for people to kind of forget all the things that Israel did during the war against Hamas, for that sentiment to be built back up. Because look, if Israel is staying inactive, people will remember how bad Israel's enemies actually are. And so, honestly, in my opinion, the reason why a lot of secular Americans support Israel is not necessarily because they like Israel so much or they find Israel so appealing, but it's because their enemies are so they're extremely against Western values. I'm trying to use kind of some more tactical language than I think Asmongold used when he said this, but because Israel has such Western values in comparison to a lot of the other nations in the Middle East, a lot of Americans just look down on those values and be like, why haven't you guys sort of, for lack of a better term, caught up in terms of women's rights, for example, LGBT rights, for example, free speech. Even Democrats believe in having, free speech to some degree. I may not think that it's full free speech, but it's some freedom to say some things, at least a lot more than what you would see in a lot of Middle Eastern countries. But yeah, like there are so many rights. There's a litany of rights that Western nations have, including Israel. Now, Israel doesn't have nearly as many of those rights as the United States does, or even some certain European countries do. But they're still better when it comes to being democratic than other nations in the region. So I think that if Israel stops doing as many, bad or important things, or just things that, have really bad PR, and people remember just how bad their enemies are, then support for Israel will rise once again.
Issue here is that Tucker is the one saying it. Why aren't Democrats the ones saying it? Why are Democrats running away from other Democrat adjacent content creators who are saying it? People like myself. You need to lean into this. This is where the base is across the board. You're never going to win the evangelical right that has unlimited appetite for death and destruction over there and love Israel.
You can win them over by talking about something else. Here's the thing. There are certain things that literally everyone agrees on. So for example, the SAVE Act, not literally, but the vast majority of Americans agree in the core tenets of the SAVE Act, which is basically that, like, if you're voting in an election, you should have to prove that you're a citizen in order to vote. The majority of Americans support that, right? So that's like one thing where, most people would probably look at it and be like, yeah, I support that. What other thing? I don't know, like free school lunches in public schools. Most people would probably look at that and be like, oh yeah, I support that. That would be great. So this idea that, oh, well, you just got to give up catering to the right because they're not going to, support you on Israel. Like, of course, the far right is not going to support the far left on Israel. Well, actually, maybe they will. I mean, horseshoe theory is legit. But, like, of course, people who are extreme Zionists are not going to hold hands with people on the left when it comes to destroying Israel. But you can likely find other things that they would support and agree on. I don't know what those things might be, but there have to be some sort of issues where you can go across the aisle and be like, okay, I am down with this value or that value that you have, whether it be with crimes, handling of crime, tax policy, foreign policy. There are a litany of other issues that you could appeal to the right on. You don't have to talk about Israel all the live long day. There are other things going on in the world.
If you listen to AIPAC lobbyists, if you listen to pro-Israel lobbyists and people with a tremendous amount of influence capabilities that are constantly making phone calls anytime a Democrat says anything about Israel, so then you have to manage your rhetoric around this issue in a way that doesn't offend these psychos, you are giving ground to a right-wing populist, just like Donald Trump did initially. This was the pre-October 7 election, right? Donald Trump won, where Democrats were so predisposed with a pro-corporate sentiment that was supposed to be like responsible governance that Donald Trump was able to come out and look like a more moderate figure than he actually was on a lot of issues, on issues that Americans care about, right? Like, I'm not going to touch Medicare. I'm not going to touch Social Security. I'm not going to do wars. These were all moderate positions from a Republican that most Republicans had never heard of. That's why he was able to win so much favor with normies and low propensity voters. You can't defeat that with wishy-washy, middle of the ground bullshit, middle of the road bullshit. You can't defeat that kind of narrative.
Maybe you could literally run on that same platform again, because I think with everything going on in, overseas, especially, the next president is likely to be more hawkish. Like, the next president is probably going to be more hawkish and be like, oh, we got to go out there and finish what we started. Hoorah. Like, you'll probably see a lot more of that than a lot of the measured, like, oh, we should stand back and stand by. We shouldn't be getting into all these wars. These conflicts are useless. Like you're not really going to see as much of that, much of the calm rhetoric on the right this time around, I don't think. And that's why I think that part of that's going to be, especially if Ron DeSantis is the nominee, but also you see a bit of that if Marco Rubio is the nominee as well. Now, Marco Rubio, I think, would have a little bit more of a nuanced and measured approach to international conflict, but he's not the type of person who'd be like, oh, we need to step back from the world stage because we're too involved, right? That's not something you're going to see from the right this time around in 2028, in my opinion. So he's right there about what that core message is about Donald Trump that appealed to a lot of people. But guess what's that in there? Israel. And nobody's running around and going to Trump and being like, oh, hey, Trump, do you support Palestine? Like, nobody was doing that. if Donald Trump said, "Oh yeah, I support Palestine," to the end of the line, like I don't think that he would have gotten as many votes as he did.
Narrative. You only allow your opposition to lie about their positions if you are not making a convincing argument. If you're not even interested in making a convincing argument. If you're not even interested in hearing why they are popular. This is why Kamala Harris lost. And this is precisely why, if Tucker Carlson actually runs for office, he will come out of that primary the victor 100%, and he will defeat the overwhelming majority of Democrats right now as they stand. And yes, that even includes left flank Democrats as well, unless they dramatically change the way that they communicate about these issues. Specifically, be unshakable, be more convincing in your advocacy.
You know what? I wonder if he's saying all this to convince people on the left who are considering running for office to be anti-Zionist. I wonder if that's what's going on here. If it is, it might work, but it's terrible advice because it's not true. It's absolutely baseless. This is just awful. This is awful.
Do this wishy-washy.
What's so amazing is that Israel, which at least is acting in what it perceives to be its own national interest, is joined by its shills in the United States, of course. But really, its only other ally in this is the American news media, whose job it is to tell you the truth and inform you as to what's happening, to tell you, hey, wake up. The world could be changing, and it's going to affect you and your family. That's their job. And instead, they've been lulling you to sleep with the same variety of transparent lies and propaganda.
Who's fighting harder against this war, Tucker Carlson or Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries? Not close, right? It's embarrassing to have Democratic leaders outflanked on the anti-war position by some on the right. Democratic leaders are pathetic, controlled opposition, useless, right? And there's truth to what Cenk is saying, but there's also truth to what Edgar Mentum is saying. So are you going to ever mention that there's absolutely no anti-war constituency whatsoever among the MAGA right? Or are we just going to play dolls with influencers and TV hosts forever?
No, it's because, generally speaking, if the state of America is like, oh, we've got a threat overseas, these people are trying to kill us, we need to stomp them out before we get nuked into oblivion. Regardless of whether or not the government's lying about that, they've been known to lie about things like that in the past. They might be lying now for all I know. I mean, I choose to believe them, but tepidly, I admit that the government might be lying to me about this. But the thing is, whenever the government says, oh, there's a threat overseas, they're going to try to kill us, the right always believes that. So when the right falls for that line, then they're going to be like, oh, well, we need to do whatever it takes to sort of stop out that threat. So this idea that, oh, MAGA's not, pro-war anymore, it all crumbles if you just tell them, hey, there's a big threat overseas, right? So, for example, I don't think the majority of MAGA thinks that we need to take Greenland, for example, right? Like, if you gave a bunch of Republicans a poll and said, hey, would you support going to war so that we can take Greenland by force? You get maybe 5 to 10% support for that policy. But I think on the right, the right sort of has a little bit of a clearer eye and clearer vision when it comes to war. The right, seems to have a clear head and actually understand the fact that war is necessary sometimes, right? Sometimes there are good reasons to go to war, but there shouldn't be a default to always be on the conquest, right? Trying to rule their nations. I think the problem with the right there is that they tend to think that there are too many things that are legit reasons for war, but still, that's one of the differences between left and the right.
To which I responded with, I think about this a lot. Tucker's platform is large, and I always assumed it was MAGA, but 85% of MAGA loves the Iran war. Does this mean that independents and Dems are watching Tucker now? Is MAGA still watching him and just simply disagreeing? Matthew Hassan says, I know lots of normies who watch Tucker now for his anti-war, anti-Israel content, which is true. I see it too. I'll get on a plane sometimes, and the motherfucker sitting next to me is watching Tucker Carlson. Now, of course, I'm sitting in business, so maybe that's the reason.
Yeah, it's part of it too, probably.
I'm just seeing it out in the wild, right? I don't see Tucker as a realistic populist candidate for the right in 2028, just neocons and losers and probably after Trump. Tucker Carlson is the only.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if a neocon became president of the United States. I think that just basically means like a liberal, but just like a little hawkish on foreign policy, maybe having right-wing social values, but in general, just like having liberal political values. I think, if I remember correctly, I listened to Albert Mohler break this down some months ago. But I wouldn't be shocked to see a neocon become president of the United States again.
Path for salvation for the right. Maybe JD Vance might have a shot at it, but much more limited shot at it. Tucker Carlson is the true spiritual successor, the MAGA movement. He is the only one who is capable of carrying the base. I said that for the last decade almost, okay? I've been saying that nonstop. I've been warning about Tucker Carlson since 2016. He is one of the most dangerous right-wing figures in this country. JD Vance is awfully quiet lately. That's because he has ambitions for 2028 and he knows to shut the up right now, because if he was held responsible for what's going on right now, that's a horrifying reality for his prospects, for his 2028 prospects. If Tucker won the presidency, do you think he would actually decouple at least distance from Israel? I don't know what he would do, man. I think he's a grifter at the end of the day, so I don't know. But the way he communicates on these issues is like, do you want to live in a country that is a objectively white supremacist fascist state, purging 65 million people that Tucker calls migrants, that happen to have a Latino background, but also simultaneously we have maybe decoupled from Israel? I think that's a really dangerous gamble, because a lot of people will take that.
Interesting. That's horrible analysis. Horrible analysis. These top comments: Tucker Carlson versus Gavin Newsom is the ultimate nightmare scenario. So the interesting thing is, was saying, this is from ZapDog, saying Tucker Carlson versus Gavin Newsom is the ultimate nightmare scenario. The interesting thing is, like, the far left would hate Gavin Newsom. Like, I've got a friend who's about as far left as it goes, and he does not like Gavin Newsom, but I explained to him, like, hey, it's a Riz contest. Running for president, it's a popularity contest. Gavin Newsom has the Riz. And with the advent of Donald Trump and the media's attacks on him, Trump is literally Hitler, right? So, Gavin Newsom ran his country to the ground, but is he Hitler? No. So, the bar is so low now when it comes to like scandals that like someone like Gavin Newsom could skate on by. And that's not even to mention like the Zionism or whatever. I think that that's a non-issue for people in the center of the aisle. Let me see. Is anyone else calling out Hassan Piker for this terrible analysis? Literally nobody in the comment section is calling him out. But I mean, I guess that makes sense. Considering his audience, I don't think that a lot of them would be, stopping to think and be like, hey, maybe that doesn't make sense. Whew. All right. Oh, hold on. Wait. I did not mean to press that button, but it is what it is. All right. So we've got this video here from Cold Takes. It's called Democrats Have No 2028 Plan. Let's go ahead and check this video out.
I don't think there's any argument at this point that there is a war going on within the Democratic Party. Did you think I was talking about Iran? Huh? No, I thought about making a video, but I feel like I don't have enough to say yet, so I don't want to bore you with mindless speculation on that until we know more. But in the meantime, I think there is this great piece from Axios that just came out, and it's describing in great detail what's going on within the moderate wing of the Democratic Party. A side I don't think we're hearing about that much recently. Specifically, it's covering a group called Third Way. It's a center-left group that operates with politicians inside the Democratic Party. They're building the case right now for a middle-of-the-road, moderate Democrat to run as the party's nominee in 2028. I think it's fair to argue that there is a newfound urgency for this kind of push from the moderates within the Democratic Party due to recent wins from the progressive left.
And I guess moderate would be a fair way to characterize me. I'm an aspiring centrist. I'm center right. So, maybe someone from Third Way would entice me as well.
We're talking about Zohran Mamdani in New York City, and progressive candidates are doing very well in the primaries so far in the 2026 midterms. The first name that comes to mind is Graham Plattner in Maine. I'm sure you've seen one of his ads somewhere if you're watching this channel. There were arguments being made after Donald Trump's win in 2024 that the Democratic Party needed to come together to reach some kind of consensus to beat back whatever movement had just decimated them in 2024 in the next presidential election. And it seems to me from this sort of organization that we are still very far away from this happening. So I want to take a look at exactly what's happening within this center-left group, because I don't think we've been hearing much from this wing of the party recently. And it's important to know where everyone stands going into future elections.
Yeah.
And I also think it'll be interesting to take a swing at their most important argument, the electability argument. So let's get right into it. At this most recent Third Way event, the president, John Cohen, kicked it off by basically taking some swings at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, arguably the most prolific, popular Democratic socialist who could possibly run for president in 2028. He basically argued in his speech that political groups tied to AOC and Bernie Sanders since 2018 have won effectively 0 battleground House seats, and that making them the face of the party is a risky pick going into especially the midterms and the 2028 race, if the argument is that Democrats need broad congressional power to get their agenda passed. Now, a spokesperson for Justice Democrats, one of these groups that he's talking about, responded to this pretty promptly. They argue that their goal is not to flip battleground House seats and put Democrats in those seats. They argue that their role is to replace, quote, corporate Dems in deep blue seats, not to flip GOP seats. Now, in case you're thinking,
Yeah, that's an interesting take. That's an interesting take. In any flip is a flip, right? But I think that it's a mistake to not target some GOP seats. Like, there are probably Republicans like me, especially you have to consider too, you've got the rise of like Nick Fuentes, James Fishback. I think that Ron DeSantis is like sort of like the first whiff of this, but we're actually about to see a wave of actual fascists in the Republican Party who are fighting for not just, state control, but federal control of the American government. So I actually think it's a mistake to not try and target GOP seats as well. But I understand if you're an organization, you've got limited resources. So if you're a Democrat, maybe appealing to Democrats might work a little bit better because you're also, you're already a Democrat. So you sort of know what appeals to them already.
Quote that mischaracterizes the core of the speech. You should know that other aspects of the speech criticize teachers' unions and the language police. And he had a pertinent quote where he was telling Democrats to, quote, stop peddling the idea that there are tens of millions of non-voters just waiting to be mobilized by a left-wing siren song. It is delusional and widely debunked, end quote. He also brought up polls that said that voters saw Kamala Harris as more extreme than Donald Trump in 2024. Now, at this point, you may be thinking, who is this guy? I never heard of John Cohen before.
Yeah, I never heard of him either.
Report on the front of their page today talking about this guy's speech. Well, the fact of the matter is he does run this group Third Way, and it's not the only group within the Democratic Party that is pushing forward these values. Just since the 2024 election, we have seen Third Way, along with Searchlight Institute, Majority Democrats, and New American Era, all take stances advocating and lobbying the party to take more moderate positions in future elections. Now, I think the thing I keep coming back to and thinking about is that if this really was such a prolific feeling on the left, how come we are consistently seeing progressive Democrats take the lead in stride in races across the country? If I were advocating for a more left-leaning candidate in the race, I would bring up the fact that 2 of the last 3 presidential elections have been moderate Democrats that have lost to Donald Trump. If you had some sort of muscular
No. You have to consider the fact that they were also lame. Because this is a popularity contest. It's all a popularity contest. It's who has the most riz. And there aren't a lot of people. They're probably more now than there were before, but there still aren't like a ridiculous amount of people who have way more riz than Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton doesn't have more riz than Donald Trump. Kamala Harris certainly doesn't have more riz than Donald Trump. You would need someone like Gavin Newsom to beat Donald Trump, and guess what? Gavin Newsom is a moderate. One thing too is that people who are moderate or closer to the center just tend to be more likable. The farther to the left and the right you get, the more likely it is that you're going to have an abrasive personality. Nick Fuentes, far right, extremely abrasive. Hassan Piker, far left, extremely abrasive. Ilhan Omar, far left, extremely abrasive. AOC, far left, extremely abrasive. Who else? James Fishback is probably abrasive as well. I haven't heard as much of what he has to say. But there's just like no one who's extreme on policy who is relatively nice on rhetoric, except for like James Tallarico, right? Other than like him, and James Tallarico has no riz. You know, he is the riz of like a theater kid, which is not what you need when you're trying to become president of the United States and appeal to the average American voter. But, you know, all of that stuff aside, you know, this idea that you have to be a moderate on values is not true. Now, I think that James Tallarico is going to make some Democrats realize, hey, you know, you can have radical views and just like be super nice, and then you'll trick everybody and everyone will vote for you. I think someone's going to crack that code eventually. Some would argue that Donald Trump is well, actually, no, Donald Trump is abrasive. Yeah, he's going to crack that code. But yeah, I think that eventually someone's going to find that formula and crack that code, and then that'll be really interesting to see what the result of that is.
In that race, maybe things go in a different direction. I don't know what conversations you're having with your friends or what conversations you're having online. And this is totally anecdotal, but I feel like we are seeing a lot of revisionism for the 2016 election. Thoughts about what would have happened if Bernie Sanders was the nominee in that race instead. I'm not saying Donald Trump would have lost the race in that scenario, but this sort of thought pattern, a what if you will, putting the strong progressive as the more electable candidate than the moderate, I think is a sign and a personification of a different way that voters are starting to look at these races, at what candidates Democrats should run. I mean, you look at the people who RSVP'd to this third way moderate event. We're looking at officials from Google, Meta, and General Motors, Biden White House alumni, an aide to the secretive super PAC Future Forward, along with political commentators like Matthew Iglesias. Make your own conclusions from this guest list.
Well, that makes sense because, you know, basically the far left wants to target employers. Right, all of the rich people, the companies, they want to sort of, you know, take a scalpel to all of their funds and then send all that money to the government. That's kind of what the far left wants to do. It's one of their big things. So Meta, Google, all those businesses that have, you know, tons of operations all across the country, like probably hundreds of thousands of employees as well. They're looking at their bottom line and being like, okay, well, we've got a threat to our business. Let's back the side that's most likely to not threaten us, which is fair, right? You know, I'm not going to say that I'm the biggest stan of like Google, Alphabet, Meta, and all these other companies. But at the same time, I also recognize the fact that, hey, you know, we need these companies to exist to some extent, right? We shouldn't just be carving them out, starving them, and then, you know, killing all of their revenue, taking all of their CEOs and throwing them in the hoosgow. I don't think that is something that is helpful for the American economy. So that's why when he's like, oh, well, these CEOs are going to this meeting, I don't really take that to mean the worst thing in the world, especially when they're opposing a force in political leftism that essentially just wants to impoverish whoever's richest, and then they'll probably just go down and they'll impoverish the middle class until there's no one really left to impoverish.
And how much they actually understand the base of the Democratic Party. I think this is an interesting chart we should take a look at real quick. This is showing how political figures are perceived by the left, right, and center. It is from Silver Bulletin, and I think it paints an interesting picture. If we look all the way on the top, we're looking at candidates who are sort of perceived as far left in the general mainstream media, and it's from a piece that argues that the smaller the gap is between how the left and the right perceive the candidate on the political spectrum, the better that candidate does in elections. The more they're understood by the public, left, right, and center. Now, if you hold conventional political beliefs, you may think that politicians in the center are more electable consistently, as most Americans consider themselves independent, middle of the road, etc. What this chart claims is that politicians on the far left and on the far right can sometimes benefit from this phenomena, that their messaging is clear and consistent enough that the left and the right are actually not that far apart in perceiving that candidate's politics, because they've made it so clear. Specifically, Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Donald Trump on the other end of the spectrum.
I think the problem is that, with the exception of Bernie Sanders, what these people don't necessarily represent radical values. What they represent is a change in American governance in moving towards a new vision for America, which is what, a lot of people look for when they're voting for someone, because there's usually an issue with the country, which is why they're going back to the polls and like, oh, you know what, you need to fix this, you need to fix that. So, Zoran Mamdani he's a fresh change, fresh new start in New York. AOC, fresh new face. Donald Trump, bold new vision. These are all people who represent something new, exciting, and hope for the future, right? Regardless of their political views and values, that's at a very broad and a high level what they represent. So I think that's why they're more successful, not necessarily the fact that everyone agrees on what their values are.
Have made themselves so well known and so clear that their left or right leaning beliefs that might be compromising to a centrist candidate are sort of baked in to their identity. Now, this isn't necessarily an argument to say that farther left or right leaning candidates are always better for the electorate, but it's not arguing the inverse either. If we look at the second chart from Silver Bulletin, we can see that the y-axis is the average distance from voters on policy preferences, with the further down being closer to the voters' views and the left to right spectrum being the left to right spectrum. Now, you can see here in the middle that a candidate like Liz Cheney, despite being pretty center on the ideological spectrum, is quite far from voters on a wide variety of issues. And you can see candidates like Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, even J.D. Vance and Robert Kennedy Jr., again, are pretty close to voters' views within their camp. The American electorate is very strange. I'm sure if you've looked at any broad opinion poll, you've also come to this conclusion, especially if you're very into politics, if you follow politics online. But it shows that
that's where it's most frustrating, because the problem is that the most people who vote are not like very plugged into politics, and that's why it becomes like a popularity contest rather than people looking extremely scrupulously at the actual policies that these candidates are putting forth and how they affect people.
Candidate like John Fetterman actually is more in line with the average voter than many may think. And he's a centrist, which makes it hard to draw a definitive conclusion about this. But I think it's a great start at arguing that the way to win or lose is not necessarily contingent on where you fall on the ideological spectrum, especially within your party. It's how clear you are on messaging, it's how much voters believe that you believe what you say you believe, and how well you're able to communicate that to the people across the spectrum. By these metrics, if we go back to the first chart one more time, you'll see a candidate like Kamala Harris and even Gavin Newsom have a real problem here. Their gaps are significantly wider than their friends on the left. Again, I don't think this is a symptom of their policies or where they land on the ideological spectrum, but if you are a somewhat centrist candidate within your own party, simply with the intention of being a centrist, I think it's fair to say that the electorate has made it very clear that that is not something that they are interested in having. Anyway, I'd love to take some consulting gigs for people within the Democratic Party. If someone wants to give me $50,000 or $100,000, my DMs are open. Anyway, I've been having a lot of fun doing these 2026 midterm analysis videos. If you guys want to keep seeing videos like this, I would love to keep covering this kind of thing. But I'd also...
one thing that you could do as well is you could just use talking points on centrist issues, right? Because there are a lot of issues that most people agree on. Wait, did YouTube finally add a hide button? I've been waiting for this for years. Ever since they added the annotations, I've been waiting for them to have a full hide button. That's really cool. There are all types of things that you can speak to where there are unifying issues. Like the SAVE Act, for example. You can just go out and be like, oh, I support the SAVE Act. This is something that most people support. I think that you can have centrist or moderate rhetoric in radical positions and still win. But I still just think it's all about the riz and what you represent to the American people, more than what your actual platform is, that matters the most to folks. So I think that he mistakes, these fresh new faces being radical or relatively radical, for being reflective of people really seeking polarizing figures and candidates. All right, so we've got this clip here. This is an extracted clip. This is from a New York Times podcast. The Ezra Klein Show. But this was posted by Club Tallarico. It's called James Tallarico Destroys the Myth of Christian Nationalism. By the way, I am a very strong opposer of James Tallarico, on primarily from a spiritual level. Actually, I'm a Christian, and he grossly misrepresents Christianity. He sort of like basically uses it as a coat or as makeup over whatever political policies he wants to advance, which, by the way, to be fair, Christian nationalists do this as well, but I think it's gross when both sides do it. But what I hate most about it is that at least a lot of people look at Christian nationalists and they recognize, hey, this is horrible, this is bad. You would think that, Jesus wouldn't stand for these things. I would imagine that's like what a lot of even people in the world look at Christian nationalists and say, and I think that's good. I think it's fair. It shows that some people at least have some idea of what Christianity is supposed to be like. Meanwhile, they look at James Tallarico, and just because he talks nice, they assume that everything he's saying must be godly and biblical. That's just not true, and I think it's deceiving and extremely deceptive.
These politicians want a Christian nation unless it means providing health care to the sick, or funding food assistance for the hungry, or raising the minimum wage for the poor.
Let me wind that back.
Politicians want a Christian nation unless it means providing health care to the sick.
See, right? So, like, the idea. Oh, hold on. What's up, Nanubi? Hold on. Wait a second. Today, what are you talking about? Sorry. My computer. So, for context, my computer's running out of space right now. So, I need to clear out some files. In order for my computer to continue recording the stream on my end. Hold on, give me 1 second as I try to figure this out. I think this should do for now. All right, there we go. Okay, we're cooking with gasoline again. Okay, hold on. So let's get back to this.
Want a Christian nation unless it means providing health care to the sick, or funding food assistance for the hungry, or raising the minimum wage for the poor.
Welfare is not an inherently so this is exactly what I was talking about, right? So he's cloaking these political positions in godliness. It's like, if you're godly, you would support welfare systems, right? It's what all Christians would support. If you just look at the Bible, it says, give everyone food stamps. It's in the Old Testament and the New Testament. But that's just not true. That's just not true.
And so it seems like they want to base our laws on the Bible until they read the words of Jesus. Welcome the stranger. Liberate.
Right. Yeah, we welcome the stranger. We have a whole citizenship class that people take, and say, hey, welcome to the country. Here are our rules. Here's our culture. Here are our laws, right? So we welcome the stranger, right? Welcoming the stranger is a little bit different than being lenient to the invader.
The oppressed. Put away your sword.
You liberate the oppressed. I don't know what law he's referring to there. Put away your sword. Bro. Jesus literally told the disciples to run around strapped because they were going to the hood. I'm not joking. Look, hold on. Wait a second. Wait. Hold on. Hold on. To arm themselves. I need to be a little bit better at memorizing chapter and verse these things. Hold on, let me see. I'm trying to find a Bible Gateway link because Bible Gateway is my favorite Bible website. It's weird. I've been searching Bible Gateway, and the website doesn't come up on any of the doesn't come up on any of the search engines. But anyways, so apparently it's in Luke 22. Okay, here. So look, bro, Jesus literally says, y'all are going to the hood, get strapped so you don't get caught lacking. Okay. Supplies the road, and this is verse 35. It says here, and he said to them, when I sent you without money bag, knapsack, or sandals, did you lack anything? And they said nothing. Then he said to them, but now he who has a money bag, let him take it, and likewise a knapsack. And he who has no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one. For I say to you that this is written what must still be accomplished in me. And he was numbered with the transgressors. For the things concerning me have no end. So they said, Lord, here are 2 swords. He said, it is enough. Does this sound like someone who would think that all guns and swords are bad? No. This man is an expert farmer, cherry picking whatever quotes and passages he needs to in order to, get his message across. And this is why I struggle to sort of view him as a Christian, because instead of being like, okay, let me let my Christianity drive my politics, or rather, let me use politics as a way to bring people to Christ. Instead, it's almost like he's using Christianity as an evangelical tool to bring people in towards his political ideology.
Sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor. I mean, I'm not exactly sure a Christian nation is really what these people want. Again, I believe the separation of church and state is sacred. I think a nation...
And on that, I agree with James Tallarico, absolutely.
With one supreme religion is not just un-American. I also think it's un-Christian.
I think when it comes to a supreme... I don't know what you mean by a supreme religion. You can have a predominant one. Christianity has been that for a while now. It's dying, but it's as a supreme religion. But it has served as that for quite some time now.
Given how Jesus taught about religious supremacy. But I do think if these people are going to call for a Christian nation, they need to reach for all of it. And that is... I fought the bill to require the 10 Commandments posted in every classroom. And I've often wondered, instead of posting the 10 Commandments in every classroom, why don't they post money is the root of all evil in every boardroom? Why don't they post do not judge in every courtroom?
It's a little bit of a disingenuous argument, because I don't think he actually supports that, right? Because, he's saying that we should have the separation of church and state. Maybe he's saying that's his counter argument to that law.
Why don't they post turn the other cheek in the halls of the Pentagon? Or it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. This is the inconsistency I'm trying to call out. Because they're using my tradition. They're speaking for me. And so I think I have a special moral responsibility to combat Christian nationalism wherever I see it.
Now, I will say that, it does also anger me to see the Christian nationalists speak out. And he's a Christian nationalist in a different way. But it does anger me to see the Christian nationalists on the right sort of speaking as if they are the authorities on Christianity, when they are probably one of the grossest misusers and abusers of biblical texts when it comes to how Christians ought to engage in politics. So I understand where he's coming from there.
Scripture says Christian nationalism wherever I see it.
So I guess it's skipped there.
You can't love God and hate other people. That's in 1 John. You can't love God and abuse the immigrant. You can't love God and oppress the poor. You can't love God and bully the outcast. We spend so much time...
No, but I think bullying and oppression is so awesome and cool. Hatred. I love hatred. Who doesn't love hatred? Everyone on the right loves hatred. That's like the best. What are you talking about? This guy's insane. You can tell I'm joking here. This is one thing I don't like about him too, and you see this on the left though all the time, is that they will use passive-aggressive, condescending language to sort of dismiss people disagree with them as having certain hostile or evil views, right? So, like, for example, let's say you support the immigration let's say you support the enforcement of immigration law, for example, right? They'll say that you love oppression and you hate strangers and immigrants, right? But, they'll do that and be like, oh, you know what? I mean, the crazy thing is that Jesus said that, we should be nice to people. So, but you see ice and they're mean. You know, it's like you're talking to me like I'm a child, while also, you know, having like an understanding of Christianity that's even worse than what a child who was taught solid theology would have. You know, which is crazy because he went to seminary, and I was like, this guy. It sounds like this guy went to seminary just so he could get all the answers wrong. But apparently the people running the seminary did too, because, you know, they're like progressive Christians or whatever. So like, there's that as well.
Looking for God out there, that we miss God in the person sitting right next to us, in that neighbor who bears the divine image. In the face of a neighbor, we glimpse the face of God. All of this is rooted in your tradition. All of the commandment to love God and love neighbor is not from Christianity. It is from Judaism. And all Jesus is clarifying as kind of a radical rabbi is that neighbor is the person you love the least. The parable of the Good Samaritan, maybe the most...
I don't think that was his point. I think his point is like, not like who's your neighbor. The question is, who isn't your neighbor? We're all members of the human race, so we all have some relative kinship, right? So, you know, I think what Jesus was saying, when Jesus responded to the question of who is your neighbor, I don't think he was saying that to be like, oh, the person you like the least, that's your neighbor. The person you like the most, that's a distant relative. Like, no. I don't think that's what he was getting at. But I think that Jesus used an example of the type of person that you might not like by default as an example to challenge you, right? Because, like, for example, with the rich young ruler, when Jesus said, go sell all your money that you have to the poor and then follow me, there are many other things that rich young ruler needed to do in order to follow Jesus, right? But Jesus wanted to be provocative and test him to see if he would actually follow his commandments to the letter, to the letter, and therefore was like, hey, I know that this is one thing you really don't want to do this for me. And he did it, you know.
Famous of Jesus's parables is so, I think we forget in our modern context how shocking it was, because today being a good Samaritan just means helping people on the side of the road, which is good. You should do that. But for Jesus's listeners in the first century, the Samaritans were not just a different religious group. The Samaritans were their sworn enemies. And so he is pushing the boundaries on how we define neighbor, and who we're supposed to love. Loving our enemies, I mean, again, it's become trite in a culture dominated by Christianity, but none of us actually do that. None of us actually love our enemies, even if we say we try to.
I disagree. James Talarico strikes me as someone who perhaps loves his enemies. There are a lot of other people. I love my enemies. There are a lot of people, especially in Christianity, who love their enemies. I think the problem is he's looking at policy. He's like, if you don't support this policy, that's not love. And so if you don't support this policy, you don't love your enemies. You don't love your neighbors. You don't love these people, that people, whatever. And so I think that's kind of the framework that he's probably looking at things with.
Yeah, I share the same revulsion that Christians in the halls of power are blatantly violating the teachings of Christianity on a daily basis and hurting our neighbors in the process.
I mean, to be fair, he violates them far worse. To be fair, he violates them far worse. It's a little hypocritical to be like, oh, they don't follow the tenets of Christianity. I mean, neither does he. So like, you went to seminary and you didn't hear the story about, taking the speck out of your neighbor's eye. Interesting. Yeah, there's more to this guy. We're gonna be reacting to more of this guy in the future. But unfortunately, I do have to cut this stream short. I wish that I could have, spent more time on the stream, but alas, I could not. And it looks like no one sent any chat messages, which is good. That means I didn't miss any chat messages. My Unified chat is broken. I will be fixing it at some point. I promise each and every one of you. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this stream. Check out the Discord server. The link is on screen. It's dscrdd.ntwb.cc is the place you want to be if you want to chat with me. I upload videos on the 90B Highlights channel every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at noon on on YouTube, so go check that out as well. Also on Rumble. I've got a Rumble channel. I've been uploading as regularly on Rumble as I have been on YouTube as well. So check that out as well. I stream live on YouTube, on Kick, and on Rumble. I'm considering streaming live on Twitch. I'm still thinking about that. But anyways, that's pretty much all I got for you guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. Have a good one, y'all. Peace out.